It is not always easy to find something all Americans of all ages and political spectrums agree on. But there's one thing, apparently, that we do. We don't trust social media companies with our information. That's the big takeaway from a new Washington Post poll. You see the headline from the paper here, and the subhead reading, quote, "Pulled between not trusting some tech companies and still wanting to use their products, people look to government regulation." All right, let's bring in Newsy technology correspondent Tyler Atkinson for more insight here. Tyler, it is wonderful to see you, my friend. Not a stretch to say Americans don't trust big tech. I mean, that's been clear for a long time. But I think this shift on internet regulation on these big companies is a little bit of a bigger deal.
It's been a sea change where, 10 years ago we were looking at companies like Facebook and Google as being these stalwarts of American exceptionalism, especially on the capitalism front. And now we're at a point in which, Americans don't trust these companies at all. According to this Washington Post survey in 2012, about 38% of Americans believe that the government needed to do more to regulate how internet companies handle their privacy. And in 2021, that number was all the way up to 64%. We already know that Americans were incredibly concerned with how these tech companies handle their data. I don't think that that's a surprise. That same survey found that nearly 3 in 4 Americans believe that tech companies, that the collection of their user data was an unjustified use of private information. But what's interesting about these findings, I think, is that it represents this sort of growing tension between these companies that we have seen as being essential to America's, business front and the people that use them. And this is also confirming something that a lot of other surveys have found as well. Last year, the Pew Research Center published a survey which found that 3/4 of Americans had little to no confidence in tech companies from preventing the misuse of their platforms to influence the 2020 presidential election. It also found that 64% of American adults say that social media was having a mostly negative effect on the way that, things are going in this country. We're clearly at a place where most Americans look at these tech companies and see them as being problematic for one reason or another at this point. But we haven't really gotten to a point in the U.S. where we've really been able to effectively regulate or kind of hold these companies accountable for those ills.
And it's not like these companies are floating on a cloud somewhere with noise-canceling headphones over their ears and have no idea that there's this dissent. Like, they are actively saying, yeah, sure, bring it on. And you've seen these ads from Facebook, Meta now, I guess, where they've said, lots changed since the last time internet regulations were changed, and isn't it time for more? You've heard this from Instagram CEO, too, earlier this month. In fact, we have some sound I think I want to play, and just take a listen to the tone here.
Now, I recognize that many in this room have deep reservations about our company, but I want to assure you that we do have the same goal. We all want teens to be safe online. The internet isn't going away, and I believe there's important work that we can do together, industry and policymakers, to raise the standards across the internet to better serve and protect young people.
So if everybody's on board, Tyler, and the public wants it, what's the holdup here?
I think it's that we're operating with a congressional body that, despite party lines, they clearly see that there's a need for regulating these companies moving forward, and they know that the people that vote them into the positions that they're at want to see that those companies reined in. I think one of the issues is largely just the pathway that they want to take here to do it. Around Section 230, for example, the law that gives tech companies the ability to moderate content on their platforms without being fear of sued, there hasn't been a clear consensus about how that law needs to be changed, because Democrats want to change the rules so that these companies can be held liable for hate speech when it causes real-world harm, whereas conservatives want to change the rules so that it would make it so that these companies could be penalized for censoring conservative speech. I want to point out really quick that there's not concrete evidence out there that these companies do this, and that there's actually a larger body of evidence showing that conservative viewpoints tend to do much better on platforms like Facebook than liberal ones. But Congress is so deadlocked on these points that it doesn't look like there is any sort of clear consensus about what needs to be done and what pathway needs to be taken in order to make sure that these companies don't continue to harm the U.S. population.
Man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your brain. I appreciate your ability to distill this mess that we've created on our internet. Tyler Atkinson for us in Chicago tonight. Tyler, thanks.
Thank you.